Today, I'm excited to have Isabella Reed on the podcast. Isabella is the co founder of CamelAI, an app that allows you to chat with any app in your stack. CamelAI was part of the Winter 2024 YC batch and was founded by a team of ex Apple and ex Google engineers that are from UT Dallas. Prior to CamelAI, Isabella worked in senior sales and growth roles at both startups and Fortune 500 companies. It was great to have Isabella on the podcast, not only to get her insights from YC, but also to understand how she thinks AI is going to evolve and where our role as technologists comes with that. So, with that said, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, Isabella, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
Yeah, super excited to talk about some of the work you're doing in Camel AI and your experience at YC. But before we get started, I always love to talk about the story that brought you to this moment. So, what brought you into the world of entrepreneurship? Let's start from the beginning.
Oh, well, the actual chronological story of how we applied to YC, I think, is really the story of how I started with entrepreneurship. So, Eliana, my CEO, and Miguel, our CTO, left their positions at Apple and Google around the end of 2022 and started shipping products. They went into indie development, moved back in with my mom. Ileana, our CEO, is my sister.
Oh,
And
nice.
they were shipping as much as they could as fast as they could. And at any time that they would ship, they would come to me for a go to market strategy. And then one day they had an idea for what was previously Camel QA. And then we had maybe 5 sentences in a Google Doc and under 10 lines of code as a prototype. And then we decided to apply. Uh, yeah, it was very spur of the moment.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know YC. Everybody's like, "Oh, I have to have these many customers, this much traction." But YC is one of those accelerator programs where even a simple idea or a couple lines of code, like in your example, can get you in, and it's really on the team and just are you guys willing to push it or not, and the space as well. So very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And they often are really big on pivots.
mm,
So they accept teams based on just general experience when on your application that you provide and I guess like how much they like you too. So as long as you're a strong team and you have good ideas and you're just good at shipping, then I feel like they'll look at you very positively.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's really interesting actually. I did not know even while I was prepping here that the CEO is your sister. That must be an interesting dynamic. Like, how do you manage that? Because I know sometimes you got to make tough decisions, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. All the time. Of course we do. That actually is a really good question. So we've been shipping products since 2022 and working together in that capacity. We're also just we were raised as best friends,
Mm,
but I'd say that we generally work extremely well together. We do, of course, have like hacked our own communication styles so that we can make sure that we're always getting each other's point across clearly.
yeah,
But I'd actually argue because we have such a close relationship, it actually makes for a really strong co foundership. Because co founder breakups is the number one way that startups this early stage fail.
yeah.
And yeah, it happens.
Fair enough. And if you guys go too far, you can always go complain to your mom, and she can settle it how she settled it for years, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome, awesome. So your sister's left her position and her co-founder, and so you went down the line. And I know you've been in various roles and different companies at different sizes. So what was that moment where you finally decided to take the leap with them and pursue this as well?
That's a great question, too. So, I got to a point in my career where I was being promoted and doing very well. And I felt like I needed more. And I found myself applying to different volunteer positions. And I started working on the board of a charity, well, the Young Professional Branch. I
Mhm.
was on the board for about a year of the Young Professional Branch of Dallas Casa. And I found myself wanting to provide an impactful like benefit to a different organization, something bigger than myself. But my career wasn't giving me, I guess, enough fulfillment. When Ileana and Miguel approached me with the idea to drop everything and start a startup, I couldn't have said yes fast enough because I felt like I was achieving so much in my career path already and I still needed something else. Like, I don't know if you've gotten to that point in your career where you're like, what else is there? What do I do? What else am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah, yeah. I think I've my story is a little bit different, and I know the audience has heard it before, but for me, I've always wanted to do my own things, but it's just about the push of finally being like, okay, I'm not getting younger. I just gotta give it a go because it's only going to get harder and harder.
It
Uh,
really does. It really does. Yeah. I mean, doing things without, kids and without being tied to a mortgage, it's the perfect time for you to tackle the risk,
yeah.
right? And that's kind of where like what pushed me to do it too. If not now, then when? But Ileana and Miguel had started with the idea of entrepreneurship and then looped me in because they had never sold anything. Prior to this, in my sales career, I've sold upwards of 60 million in B2B SaaS. So I know how
Mhm.
to sell things, I know how to go to market, but I needed a strong product and engineer to actually give me an idea to go sell.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Well, that's perfect fit right there. And then obviously, you're very close to the team as well. So I think that was just a perfect storm of everything coming together. And I'm sure you guys are going to do great as a team here. And getting into some of the work you guys are doing. So it was Camel QA. You guys have now changed to Camel AI. And so Camel AI is focused on using AI in intuitive ways to conveniently aid its users. So you started with QAML, which allowed users to use natural language to write UI tests for mobile apps. Which, wow, I wish I knew about this beforehand when I was developing some mobile apps because that was a pain. And then you guys created Camel AI, which allows users to use a chat interface to interface with your databases, your emails, your bank accounts, and more through bespoke APIs built in house. So very, very cool stuff, very cutting edge. And I know you guys are doing a beta as well, so I'll throw the link for that in the description. And but like talking about Ileana and McGill, like what was the motivation for them to create this idea, and tell me a little bit about that journey as well.
Yeah. Okay, I have a million things thoughts wise passing through my head. Could you say QAML again? How did you pronounce that?
Uh, Q, did I say Q? I don't know.
Okay,
QAML. I don't know. QAML.
wait,
What?
that's so perfect. Okay, I'm going off on a tangent on
Sure.
that specific thing. So we got in QAML originally stood for quality assurance with machine learning, and our
Okay.
logo is a camel. So the intention was QAML pronounced camel. And so
I
that's
see.
what we originally applied to Y Combinator with. And our group partner post acceptance was like, you have to change your name. It is
I
the
see.
stupidest name. No one's going to know how to pronounce it. It's cute, sure,
Yeah.
but your target audience is going to stare at it and be like, I don't want to try to even say this. What is it? And then, God forbid, we were to talk about camel in a casual sense, and then you go back and try to Google it, and you don't even know how to spell it.
Right.
So that was a great thing to come out of Y Combinator was us changing our name to Camel QI. But back to your original question. So, what made them think of Camel? You were completely spot on. Developers hate quality assurance testing their own, you know, stuff. I was
Yeah.
going to say a different word, but I'm not sure if I can curse. um,
Go ahead. No worries.
it's hard to do. QA testing sucks, and it's not the fun part of development. It's the eat your vegetables part that nobody wants to actually thoroughly complete. So
Mhm.
we started with that product and we got through demo day with that product. So from January to April, and then about end of June, we started questioning that product. And then through July, we started making serious decisions as to whether or not we were pivoting. And
Mhm.
then by like August 1st, we were like, we have to start from scratch with something based on our learnings.
Yep. Yep, that makes sense. On a funny related note, before I get into a little bit what you're talking about there, it's funny how you're talking about, you guys started at YC in January and by August you completely pivoted and had a new product. And I was telling my friends recently and they were like, "Oh, let's plan a trip out for April." And I'm like, dude, I don't even know what's gonna happen like in the next 3 weeks, let alone April, right?
Yeah.
So time is just different for startup founders, I feel like. So it's just really funny because that just reinforces that same idea where like January you guys were all in on this, and by August you're on a completely different tangent, different work. But that's just how quickly you have to pivot and work on things.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. It's like one day is a week in startup time.
Right. Yeah. And so you got the demo day, and I guess you guys were showing QA ML, or should I say Camel? Well, what do you prefer?
At that point, we were Camel QA very firmly.
Camel QA. Okay, so you showed Camel QA the prototype for creating unit tests, and then you decided to pivot onto Camel AI and trying to work on more intuitive user designs, which I think is super cool. So you know where do you guys get started from a pivot? Because I think a lot of people are very scared about pivoting because they realize, oh my god, we invested all this time and effort, and you got into YC for this idea. How can we pivot, right?
Yep.
So like, what was sort of the spark there, I guess, and then second, like, what were the first steps you guys take from there?
Yep. That's your it was so scary. It was, but I'm so glad we did it. So, post demo day, we raised just under 2 million.
Mhm.
And then we booked 5 enterprise customers. I think I can say it. I mean, they're not customers anymore. So Snapchat, Expedia, T-Mobile, Podium, and Instacart. I think that's 5. Maybe that's 6. But uh, we had so much feedback from them after those initial pilots. All of them churned
Mm.
because LLMs are non-deterministic, obviously. And what we learned from our experience is that in order for us to create the most robust and impactful QA product on the market, we had to have something extremely repeatable and reliable that followed instructions exactly.
Yeah.
With QA, you have to have, a clear execute this task and then it executes that task exactly. LLMs don't like following instructions word for word verbatim, right?
Hmm.
So we found ourselves fighting against LLM's natural tendency. And we questioned, do we want to build out a QA solution or do we want to build an AI based product?
Right.
And the answer for us was that we could build this wonderful QA solution. However, we would have to take a lot of AI out of it because it's
Hmm.
not as deterministic as it needs to be in order to be a good QA tool.
Got
So
it.
we decided as one of our pillars of discussion or pillars of our new product and as like a company as a whole that our mission is to build in the AI space and build an AI based tool. Um, and it was really scary. We have investors. Luckily, all of our investors are so supportive. Most of them are founders themselves, so they were, totally on board and understand pivoting. Then,
Right.
second of all, our customers um, didn't want to buy it in its current state, so it's not like we really had a difficult discussion letting them go, right?
Right.
But the hard part was figuring out if the idea that we had was something worth pursuing, which
Right.
I think is another scary part of pivoting.
Hmm.
And I think that is left up to the CEO, right? It's the CEOs and the founding team, but their decision to determine is this idea the idea that we're going to go build out for however many months to figure out if we can validate it with the market.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. And I mean, at the end of the day, even if you do the pivot and the idea is not correct, you can always do another pivot. And granted, I think at the same time, if you do enough pivots, the team starts losing a little bit morale. It gets a little bit dicey, but
Yeah.
it's all about just providing value, right? So how can you understand where you can provide customer value as quickly as possible?
Yeah,
And so,
and I remember the last day of I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, no, go ahead. Yes.
The last day of YC, they had like this wrap-up session and this hilarious PowerPoint with tons of memes, to make us laugh, but also for us to just really hammer home a couple key points. And one of them was stay alive long enough to get lucky. That sometimes there is pivot hell and sometimes you are going to go through it trying to figure out an idea. But if you have runway and you keep burn low, they said statistically, after 2 years, that's when your chances really increase of finding something that's going to get you lucky.
Yeah, well, that's all you can really do, right? You can just, I have a whole thing. I have a bunch of theories, by the way. I'm a theory man. So if I get go too crazy with, let me know. But one of the big things I think about is just, you can't necessarily grab opportunity, but you can work hard and pretty much make it assured in some
Yeah.
ways. And when it comes, you can't really determine that. But if you just stay consistent, keep working, and keeping the right processes, I feel like it will eventually come. So very cool to hear that from YC as well. Definitely people I've respected for a long time in the startup space, and their advice is obviously powering a lot of founders. So very cool. And so we talk about Camel AI. So you guys decided to do this pivot, and of course, you have a breadth of tools that you guys are supporting in a natural language interface. And one of the biggest things in startups that I always hammer home on our startup is prioritization. Like, there's
Mhm.
so many different tools that you guys can integrate, and so many different customer requests. So when it comes to prioritization, how do you guys handle that? Because there's so many different tools you guys can support. So how do you determine what to support first?
That is, it's so hard because we want to satisfy every single request. And there's a mix of, hey, let's get this app connected to Camel AI versus let's perfect absolutely everything about this existing app connection.
Yeah.
Um, we have mainly been prioritizing our next app connection based on user feedback. So there's a full page. Have you seen the platform? I'm going to make you later.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
look.
Okay.
But there's a full page where all of our users have the opportunity to upvote what they want next.
I see.
And so we go based off of like literal just count of upvotes and then count of recurring times a certain feature request or bug has been reported.
Mm.
And then sometimes I bully my personal requests to the top of the list.
Oh, I see. I see. You're subverting the list. You're not playing fair.
If I need it, then so do our users, or at least
Fair
I
enough.
hope.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, you know what? The founding team sometimes knows what their users need more than the users know. So it's all right. You can play. You can pick sides and push what you want. But that's actually very cool. That's a great system, I think, too. And I think, like I said, I have a lot of theories. So one of the ones I really thought about is that in this new generation of AI, with all the AI products coming out, community is going to be such a big differentiating factor between startups, especially as the technology moat, I feel like, starts to be more and more diminished just because of the availability of technology and how much AI can help you. So I think it's really great that you guys are engaging with the community to begin with, and your customers to determine product features, because I think that's something that's going to pay a lot of dividends in the future.
I couldn't agree more. I think that it's the winner's going to be user experience, and because there are a ton of tools that are cropping up that feel similar, and a ton of tools that have kind of a lack of an exact use case or end goal.
Hmm.
And I think that there are a lot of product designers are relying heavily on the community to just tell them exactly what they want to use it for. But I think you had mentioned this earlier. Sometimes it's the founding team that has to tell the users what they're looking for, right? Like we
Yeah.
didn't know we would want hundreds and hundreds of different fonts right within Word or within whatever tool we're using to write a document, right?
Right.
Until Steve Jobs mandated it that there were
Yeah.
that many fonts, and we decided. I mean, I know I love it. It's a great feature.
Yeah, 100%. Well, he has a lot of quotes around that too, and sometimes I think people misuse it, but I think in this case, you guys are pretty bang on. So, that's awesome. And you mentioned that there's a lot of different use cases that you have. Some personal ones you like, and then some of the community wants. And I think there's always, especially in software world, right? There's this interesting balance between supporting B2B use cases and B2C use cases, especially with some of the work you guys are doing now. So, like, how do you find that balance of supporting the enterprise customers, but also supporting smaller customers or people who might want to use it on a personal basis as well?
That is, so we're still super early stage, but that question's top of mind
Hmm.
because we're still in a build motion right now. We haven't had a formal launch just yet. And the traction we've gained has mostly been through Twitter and LinkedIn posts. Nothing's been, I guess, formalized, right? So when we decide to completely launch, which is going to be at the end of September,
Okay.
we are determining who are we targeting? What is the ICP? Because what you build for B2C or even for enterprise versus startup, if you're going B2B, is so different.
Right.
Enterprises want you to be really, really good at one thing, and startups, maybe even individuals, want you to be a all in one stop shop, cover many things.
Hmm.
So we're starting by building for ourselves. And this goes back also to our conversation on pivoting. I think when in doubt, build something you need
Right.
and your team needs. And so that's where we're starting. And we are professional consumers and we are a startup. So there's a part of me that feels we are leaning towards consumer AI, professional consumer AI.
Hmm.
And yet I still see a very clear picture of how we could go to market and gear our target the enterprise.
Yeah.
But that is a battle that we are journaling about every day. So stay tuned. I'm sure I'll have an update for you in the future.
No, that makes sense. And but to be fair, one of the biggest benefits I feel like of YC is just the alumni network and having people who will use your product early stage. And I think one of the nice things about focusing on your use case as an early stage startup and a professional consumer is a lot of those startups who might be your first customers are also in the exact same place. And as somebody who has been through the enterprise deal cycle in the last couple weeks, and is sort of ripping my hair out. It takes a long time to get large enterprise customers on your platform. So I think especially in the interim, it's important to get short, small term wins with smaller customers. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, and it sets you guys up well. Where hey, you iron things out with your use case because you're your own customer, and then obviously people are in the very similar situation, and then once things are more ironed out, you can start to go through the long sales cycle that is enterprise sales and build those features out as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I have a lot of comments on how long the sales cycles can be with enterprise sales, but I definitely think for our product right now, the security level is just so high. You do have to authorize Camel QA or Camel AI. Oh my God.
you'll
We have
you'll get it.
a
You'll get it.
branded.
You can
We are
tell you've recently changed the name.
Yeah, yes. We went through like a long, tough battle on what we should rename ourselves. And
Right.
we just, I feel like Camel AI is so like obvious after we were Camel QA. And then there was the whole Twitter debacle on domains. So don't even get me started.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, so with Camel AI, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about enterprises.
Yeah. We were just talking about how first you focus on smaller startup customers and yourself, and then we get to enterprise deals, and they have a long lead cycle for
Yeah.
sales.
Yes, because of security. And now
Yeah.
you do have to authorize CamelAI to have access to your tools. So you have to OAuth into every application that you might want to use with CamelAI, and
Yeah.
that's going to add 6 months of enterprise deal cycle time. Something that we want to avoid at this early of a stage for sure.
No, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of big enterprise customers are even worrying about using like OpenAI and Claude, so they're hosting their own LLMs, self-hosting. So there's a whole myriad of problems that comes with, especially in the AI space,
Mhm.
with working with enterprise customers. So I think you guys, at least we'll see what happens. But I think you guys are taking the right approach. If my 2 cents mean anything.
Yeah, I think so too, but it's nice. It's funny that you bring up that there are enterprises hosting their own LLMs on prem. We've talked a lot about on prem implementations of Camel AI. That would be our enterprise go to market strategy. If
Yeah.
they have, if they're hosting their own LLM, then Camel AI is just a kind of a framework, right? That they
Yep.
can set up and you can use any LLM in the background.
Right.
Um, and it could all be hosted on prem. That would be how we would go to market for the enterprise using this product.
Yeah.
Um, but it's funny that you bring that up because I kind of see that as being the future of how enterprises use AI.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's the reason why I think a lot of them are also developing their own infrastructure, and Nvidia is going really crazy with the GPU sales, alongside, of course, Facebook and all these other guys buying it. But that's a whole separate conversation, and perhaps needs a deep dive. But yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the fun parts, I guess, about building a sort of framework that lies between all these different tools is integrating with the APIs that the tools have. And I know somebody who has done that in the past. It can always be interesting depending how open or how closed they are, and there's a whole, it's not very standardized a lot of the times, they're APIs. So, how do you like this? And maybe this is more for the CTO, but how do you guys, like, when you guys think about it from that point of view, like how are you able to efficiently get the integrations up and running? Do you feel like, or is it just right now just very much just focus on a couple tools, get them onboarded, and go through the pain of and bring them on?
That is a good question. Certainly more of a CTO question, but I can answer it to the best of my ability.
Hmm.
So we do have, I mean, like you said, there is a limitation on how much information we can gather from an API based on how much info that company decides to let us have. And then once you have that information, it's only so useful to LLMs and
Yeah.
functional for it to use. So we do build our own kind of translational layer, and we like to think of that as our secret sauce of how Camel works. But we're hyper focusing on how to make every API as functional for LLMs as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure there's a lot of pains there. I'm sure your CTO is not being able to sleep at night with some of the pains that brings up, but hopefully he's able to overcome it alongside the rest of the team. And what's really interesting, especially in the AI space, is just a lot of people are putting the chat interface as the default UI design, which it's very interesting. I feel like as technologists, as designers, to think about, is this the right interface? Is the change, or what does UI design look like in the age of AI? Because I think right now we've all just standardized towards this one standardized format. So what do you think about that? Like, when you think about the chat interface, what makes it so appealing today, and do you think there's going to be an evolution in UI going forward?
Yes, I think that the chat interface is easy to use and it's familiar and very recognizable. And in the same way that people are saying English is the new coding language, I think it's natural language, rather, is the new language to complete any of your tasks and to set up automations. The so I think that the chat interface, being that it's the most stripped down and convenient to use, might have some elevation to it. For Camel AI, we're adding prompt buttons,
Mm,
so or action buttons. Sometimes you don't want to type something over and over. Let's say you have a specific system prompt, or you have some type of action that you usually type in again and again and again. Since the, I guess, natural user flow of a chat interface is to always start a new chat, we're including the option to create your own prompt buttons to save those quick actions for you
mm.
and link either multiple different tools within that action button or just a single tool. I think that that's like just a slight tweak to the chat interface, but I think the chat interface is the foundation, right? I don't know if that's going to change too much. And then UIs in general, we were talking about this before, but I think that people are going to start using UIs significantly less, and that most tooling will be used by AI agents or LLMs, and that
Mm.
humans will just be interfacing with some sort of chat interface to control their mini employees that they have for either their own position or their own lives.
Right, right. No, that's super interesting. And I know we were chatting about this a little bit earlier. My take on that actually is I think the UI will evolve from becoming static, where it's like, okay, you have certain UI elements in all these different places, to being more dynamic. So like you mentioned, within the chat interface itself, uh, you can create UI on the fly that makes sense based on the different prompts. And I think that's going to be for me at least, what I think is that's going to be the big change there, where You sort of kick off the processes in natural language, but UI is built around that. And I think that's one of the things I feel like is missing today in AI. Where, and I know I mentioned this before the call, but the I although advancements in the models will help, no doubt, and obviously research and technology should keep going. I do think we're reaching this point of product designers and product thinkers needing to come in and think about different ways of implementing these technologies that we already have. Uh, and I think that will actually take AI to the next level, which it just becomes a status quo in most products. Because I think today it's more of an addition that people just throw on, and they're like, oh, let's just put a chat interface on the right side of your screen and keep everything exactly the same. But the real next generation of UI or AI apps that really take over, similar to Camel AI, I think will have the chat interface, but will have a lot of integrated UI that gets built around it.
Mhm.
So it's still this guided experience that I think is sorely missing right now in AI, where people are just like, what do I do now? What's the next step? You sort of need to guide people through it. And I think that's where the AI needs to step in.
I couldn't agree more. I don't know if you've seen our newest release. I don't think you're a beta user. It's not public yet, but I'm going to make a note to add you.
Okay.
Um, I think you'd like it. So we have an artifact panel that we've just released that
Hmm.
in real time generates all of the artifacts that you might be requesting. Like I interface with Camel AI to talk to our database, Supabase,
Hmm.
and I regularly check. I have a prompt button for it. Our usage messages sent per day by user, and it can, generate a bar chart immediately, and then you can
Right.
just edit that bar chart as you see fit. But I couldn't agree more. It's something dynamic and it's something interactable. You can click it, you can edit it if you'd like, or you can edit it using natural language, which is still what people want to do. They still want to see the results. And it's also how you build trust with the users. Um, AI does hallucinate, which you said before, there's likely limited amount of evolution today that's going to come from the models side. It's mostly going to come from user experience. I can't wait for models to hallucinate significantly less. If there is any improvement, it needs to be, just tell me that you don't know rather than making things up.
100%. No, I mean that makes complete sense. And definitely, like, I think hallucinations are, are on top of mind for most AI companies right now. So I think the models will definitely round out the experience. I think maybe that's a good way of saying it, where I think the advances in the models will help round out the experience, but the base premise is getting there,
Mhm.
where I don't think we're going to see a massive jump anymore. I feel like we're in the iPhone 4, iPhone 5 of AI, where it's like, okay,
Uh,
we know what we're getting, and like there might be still be some big significant jumps, like an iPhone 5 versus an iPhone, what we're at, like 16 coming out soon, is a big difference. But at the same time, it's nothing. The baseline is still there. Like the smartphone that was today was there in iPhone 5, but it's a small iterative inclusions and the big differences in software actually between iPhone 5 and the user design and our experiences today that really made the jump. So I'm basically saying, if I keep running with this Apple example, I'm basically saying I think we need iOS 7 from iOS 6, where we go from like skeuomorphic to this design that we pretty much have today. And I think we need to see the same thing with AI, where it's really cool you guys are mentioning that actually, because that's sort of what along the lines of what I was thinking of basically these interactable UI elements within the chat interface that are dynamically created, and so people don't necessarily have to just go on their own volition to figure out what to say to the interface and be lost. Because the
right,
reality is, we won't see mass adoption until you see very well guided interfaces for them.
right.
So, great first step from my point of view, and I'm very excited to try it.
I'm excited to get your hands on it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd love to give you guys feedback, and I think one of the very interesting things, of course, beyond just the product with Camel AI, is you guys were part of Y Combinator. Obviously, a lot of people in the world know about Y Combinator, and it's the most reputed startup incubator. So, a lot of great advice Y Combinator has, both publicly and of course in their events and the program. But based on your experiences, and I know this is a very tough question because I'm sure you got a lot of great advice. What do you think is your number one crucial piece of advice you got from Y Combinator doing the program?
I There is a ton of advice. My favorite though is around product market fit. So they stress the importance of refraining from scaling, whether that's your employees or your marketing strategy or just scaling in general, whatever that brings to mind for you, prior to true product market fit. If you have too big of an operation and your product hasn't hit a point where it's truly what the market needs, then you're in for more headaches than if you were to iterate and build with just your founding team
Mhm.
until you find this product that has zero problems with growth.
Right.
And that's how they explain it to us. I think a lot of different people have different definitions of product market fit. I know I've worked at different companies, and my friends have also, peers have also worked at different startups that have very different definitions of product market fit. But with those experience that some of my peers have had, they have trouble selling and they have a lot of trouble meeting their quota. And of course, it there could be a skill issue in terms of sales and your ability to close a deal, but it also could be a PMF issue. If
Mhm.
your founders scaled too early before having this almost like kind of viral feeling about the product and getting people to sign up, then your salespeople are always going to have trouble meeting quota, right?
Right.
So, our goal is to make sure that whatever we do build before we scale, we definitely and certainly have that true product market fit.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's always such an interesting conversation. Like, it, do you have product market fit? Do you scale early? Do you scale later? Like, what is going on? I think it's very easy in theory to know what to do, I guess, but in execution, everything is very hard. And in fact, I think that's a good metaphor for most things in startups. I think, if you asked me about startup theory before I started, I watched a lot of stuff. I'm a fan of it. I love reading this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just a guiding principle that can help you through tough times, and maybe you can think about it. But at the end of the day, you got to make the decisions, and a
Mhm.
lot of that is contrarian to standard startup advice. Like, I think that's the first thing you realize, that hey, startup advice is not this golden path that you just follow and you'll see your unicorn. No, it's a lot of times you're going to be making decisions that people are like questioning, or the general startup advice will say is wrong, but you just have to feel it out and have confidence that your decisions make sense. So, coming back to what you're mentioning, I think what can be really tough is that, especially I think early stage, a lot of people think about scaling a little bit too early before they have proper product market fit, and that can cause a lot of issues, especially as you're trying to find your core solution.
Mhm.
Because I know one of the big issues I've seen on a personal note is that you'll have these products where they have these customers with all these competing interests, and you'll make this Frankenstein of a product where you have like custom stuff for one customer, you have custom stuff for another customer, which, granted, once again, startup advice is not a hard rule, so that could be good. But at the same time, you got to find this core offering that makes sense and helps you build your product and in a very structured way. So
Uh-huh. I
I
couldn't
get
agree more.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
That's exactly what we were talking about in our last group office hours. So we still meet at Y Combinator pairs you with a bunch of like companies that are in
Mm,
the batch, and you have recurring meetings with them throughout the batch. And then afterwards, we still have monthly meetings with that same team of people that we were kind of randomly selected to be paired with. And we were talking about that last time. So one of the companies in my group office hours was is really struggling with whether or not they just continue listening to this enterprise company that is paying them and wants them to build these bespoke features, or if they should just continue to stick to their core functionality and find other users that are happy with exactly what they're offering right now. It's
yeah.
hard to say no to the money. It's also hard to say no to these enterprise folks. They're not mean. They're asking you because they like you and they
Yeah.
think you're good at what you do and they like working with you. So it's hard to say no, but should you? That's a philosophical question that you have to ask in your company, you know?
Yeah, and then obviously your investors have a thought process on that, and that it just adds more and more complications on top of everything too. So
Yes.
that's there's no easy decisions. I think people have this dream of doing the startup, and I have the dream too. And granted, I still love it. I still love doing it, and I'm very happy doing it. But it's not easy. It's really a lot easier in theory, and when you're thinking about doing it versus doing it. And I think you'll find places like this decision where down the line they'll find out if it works out or not. But at the end of the day, today it's sort of the worst of both worlds, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we turned down this enterprise customer, but then we're going back into the desert trying to find other customers.
Right.
Or do we increase the account value here, make this enterprise customer happy, and then go from there and also make our investors happy? So it's sort of, you just have to have faith in whatever decisions you're making, and take it from there. But it's not easy. I don't know what I would do in that situation, and the reality is that they probably don't know either. They're just gonna make a call.
Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like if you're on the tail end or, close to the finish line with the enterprise deal cycle that you're going through right now, then maybe, in the near future they're going to have a big feature request and you're going to be stuck in that do we do it? Do we invest all this time or do we find our next customer to onboard?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, right
you-
now I'm walking in the desert, so for me, a little bit of water is not too bad.
I-
When I gotta deal with the sharks later, we'll figure that out at that point. But that's cool, awesome. So we talked a little bit about you guys obviously focusing right now on a narrow use case with and just trying to get product market fit to begin with. But of course, growth is essential part of seeing a company succeed. Silicon Valley, we love growth out here. That's how startups work. And I know you guys are still a little bit early, but of course, when everything works out, you guys are probably going to go through a rapid growth phase very soon. So, you know, what do you think are your? I know you have still a little bit of time, but what do you think are your strategies of helping you showcase the platform to the market, and going through growth when you guys are ready to go through it?
That is another good question. So, we are focusing mostly on content creation. Our strongest leads have been through LinkedIn and Twitter. And our first step is to create that type of content creation just machine so
Yeah,
that we can pump out as much. I read somewhere that it's actually about quantity and not at all about quality in
yeah,
the world of like TikTok, for instance, short form content. So, getting really good at that, I think, is my step one. And SEO. So, we are creating just tons of landing pages that are related to all of our app connections and hoping to hit those perfect keyword phrases that are randomly generating tons of views. Um, I know Ileana and Miguel have a different application that the name of the application that they built, honestly, 1 year just picked up tremendously in Google hits.
mm,
So it's SEO is kind of a get lucky game as well, and we're hoping to do that. Another thing in terms of scaling is to actually try the enterprise strategy. I think that we should be cold calling and outbound emailing, even though outbound email is starting to die a little bit in terms of
yeah.
a method of reaching customers or prospects. But if they have an on prem LLM, then they can use Camel. And so we should certainly have a sequence machine to target them.
Right, that makes sense. I mean, very similar strategy from our point of view as well. I think well, we're trying to get smaller customers, and a lot of our smaller customers we're targeting brands with influencer marketing teams. So a lot of them are small, or like Instagram accounts with 100K or 200K followers, and but fashion and cosmetics, because that's and because that's their primary form of marketing. And so I recently started doing a lot of memes and Twitter engagement to try getting those up. And maybe I'm 2 or 3 weeks out of actually having to dance on TikTok to get to get customers, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. But yeah, that's I totally feel that, right? I think the content machine is one of those things where, similar to startups actually, where you'll walk in the desert for a bit, but you have to just consistently take steps forward, and then eventually you don't know what will go viral or what will hit, but the consistency will get you there. So it is a little bit humbling, I guess, to be doing, to do my engineering degree, work at all these companies, and now a lot of my time spent making memes. But you just gotta do what you gotta do to make things working. And I think we've seen it work. So yeah, very similar. Trying to do outbound content and then also do more direct outreach through cold emailing, which yes, has a little bit of it is dying. I don't like cold calling is a good method, but it's a little bit like I don't know. It feels a little bit like icky. I don't know how to explain it, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yep.
And then yeah, like one of the other things we're running right now is a LinkedIn community that's we're
Mhm.
bringing a lot of our target demographic into that. So that's been doing wonders for us as well. So it's cool, man. Like I think it's sick to hear how a lot of startups are going about it. And of course,
Mhm.
you guys have the Y Combinator network too, which obviously is a very, very nice benefit as well. But
Mhm.
I think that's a lot of the modern day strategy. And if you just look at a lot of the YC companies, like I know Postdoc, for example, which is I think a recent YC company a couple years ago, but they're doing really well now. They do a lot of that online too.
Mhm.
I've been like seeing their newsletter and some of the stuff they've been doing. So I think that's the modern day playbook, and it's just a matter of time for us.
Yep, I think so too. And you have to drop all cringe. You can't there is no cringe when you're a founder. Whether you're cold calling someone or you're posting a video where pre-founderhood you would die of embarrassment. No,
Yeah.
that's a thing of the past. We have to be unabashedly posting ourselves and our videos and our product.
Yeah, somewhere it's a spiritual experience too.
Oh yeah,
um,
100%.
but awesome. Well, Isabella, I had a great conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation and talking with Camel AI and some of the work you guys are doing. Two last questions before I let you go. As is the first one is there a book that you recommend reading or us checking out?
Well, dang, I feel like it has to be related to being a founder.
No, it could be whatever. It's no holds bar, whatever you like.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going off of what I've read most recently, I read Billion Dollar Whale, and it's like an FBI recounting true story of this financial fraudster called Joe Low, and how he conned like tens of billions of dollars from the Malaysian government with the help of Goldman Sachs. And it
Nice.
was so good. It was so good. So it's not founder related, but if you're looking for a good book, then it's kind of like Bad Blood in terms of fraud.
Okay.
It's just a good read.
Yeah, I'm maybe I shouldn't say this, but I love these criminal movies and like some of the ways that these guys did some ingenious scams. Not to say
Yeah.
I would do that, but honestly, like you know what? I got to give them credit because there is a lot of ingenuity in it. We don't give it enough credit for. Granted,
Yeah.
obviously it hurt people, but it is very interesting to find out how they were able to pull some of this stuff off because I think a lot of people think about our modern infrastructure, just rules are allowed like in society as very like hard line things, but then you find different ways these guys have found the loopholes or found ways of getting around it, which is always very interesting. So I got to
Yeah.
check out that book. Not to scam people, but just to pique that interest.
To make sure you know how not to, just to make sure you never do that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. So I can tell other people when they are doing and not to do it. So
Right.
when I recognize it, right? Uh, but cool. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll check that book out. And then the last question I have is just, what are the next steps for you and Camel AI? What can we look forward to?
So we're launching at the end of the month. We have a closed beta right now available. So if you want early access, go to CamelAI.com and join our beta list. But our first launch will be at the end of September. So stay tuned.
Let's go. Awesome. Well,
Oh,
really looking forward to the launch, and I'd love to be a beta user and check it out. And yeah, thank you once again for coming onto the podcast. For everyone listening, thank you for tuning in.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me.